Everything is moving faster and faster, as the late great Jim Baker once said. Actually, maybe not late. I don't think he's dead. He might still be around, but he did say that, right, when he was sort of doing his Trump apocalypse prophecy back in 2015, 2016. Everything is moving faster and faster. And it really feels this way now because, people always say that time and life goes by really quickly, and there's obviously some truth to that. But at the same time, if you've been living how we've been living these last few days making this movie, time has really expanded. It feels like weeks and weeks have passed, and we still have tomorrow, which might be maybe the busiest day of all, and we'll be pulling not an all-nighter, but we'll be going to sleep pretty late today since there's a game actually going on that we want to capture some foot traffic here in Minneapolis. Mm-hmm. And that's going to be like winding down next couple of hours. And at that point, we're going to be out there to capture that. And I mean, first of all, the whole day has been pretty fantastic thus far.
Yeah.
We had our second in-person interview with somebody that knew Bruce Ario. And one thing that I was not expecting was this guy. He had pretty much, like some of the most intelligent commentary that you will find on Bruce Ario's specific individual poems. And again, I'm not really approaching this with that necessarily in mind, and the fact that it happened, the fact that he had Bruce's poems prepared to discuss, his own that he picked out that he felt was relevant. It kind of like speaks to the fact that Bruce is, on the one hand, very accessible. Yes. On the other hand, he has abstraction. He has things that have like a multiplicity of meaning, but it's a multiplicity that people can pick up on without necessarily making the kinds of mistakes that you typically find in interpretations of poetry. So a very insightful commentary today on the poems. There were angles that I even personally haven't thought of hearing this interviewee speak, and definitely is going to be a nice part of the documentary. And I feel like there's definitely people out here that want to make this happen, right? They want to see Bruce, even in death, succeed in some way, right? They don't have the kind of pettiness and the kind of resentments and the kind of, why is this documentary being done about him? Should be done about me, right? People generally want to see him succeed, and we've met a lot of good people in Minneapolis in that regard. So, another really nice interview. Our final in-person interview will be tomorrow, and we'll see how that goes. And we have a lot more updates as far as what happened today and what's happening tomorrow. But maybe Joel should take it away from here.
Sure. Yeah, I echo your comments. Again, the interview this morning exceeded expectations. And one thing that was really nice about the poems that he picked to read is that they were almost entirely different from the ones that we had yesterday's interviewee read. And we provided those to him, but Patrick today just had picked these of his own accord, and they were also very, very good poems of Bruce's. It's not like they were some of his more, kind of castaway poems about, I don't know, dogs and cats or something. I'm just, of course, picking that out of thin air, but these poems that he chose had some depth. They had quality. They had things that obviously stood out to him, and so it was great. And yeah, just you and I made no less than 5 side glance smiles at one another during his comments, because we both knew in that moment that's a gem. That is something that you wouldn't hear from most folks who are going to read Bruce's poetry or any kind of poetry. And, it just kind of validated for us being there and doing this interview, because we didn't really know what to expect. This was someone who had known Joel Ario very well, Bruce's older brother, in their younger years, and knew Bruce more as Joel's little brother, quote unquote, for quite some time, but now has, he said, come to know Bruce better through his work, which is what we're hoping to do. We're hoping to move that along. It's what that's what artists do by their very nature, is that, you know, you get to know them via their work, whether they're alive and producing or having passed on and now leaving it behind. So that aspect was great, and they're just very kind. You know, this couple is very kind, welcoming us into their home, and their home had a lot of, you know, it's kind of a historic home here in Minneapolis, in one of the neighborhoods, you know, somewhat southeast of where we are, and there's just a lot of character to the home and the neighborhood. It's, you know, kind of had a lot of these nice old touches. He said the house is 114 years old, so really kind of some nice things there to capture. And then from there, you know, we kicked on. I mean, what did we end up doing? We met up for a brief moment with yesterday's interviewee, just a quick little in passing to have him sign something. We forgot to have him sign, but I realized I lost a piece of gear and left it at the church yesterday, but then you were kind enough to call on my behalf, and they found it, so that was good. Quite quickly, so we're going to swing back by there tomorrow to grab that. And then we kind of started the afternoon session. From there, we went out on a walk, again, just launching from the Airbnb up the river a little bit further, then across a different bridge today, and we went and got some lunch at actually a very good local deli here, and then made the trek back, caught some more things on that run, and then I'll hand it back over to you to say what you want to so far about our visit to Bruce's condo at the time of his passing. We went there as our final stop for the afternoon, fading into evening session.
Well, before even we get to that, so during the interview, you know, I was thinking, okay, when I eventually do the script for the film, I was wondering, like, should we have some kind of wider historical context, right?
Yeah, true.
You know, there's like a strong Native presence as well as history here, meeting Native Americans. It seems relevant in some way to work into Minneapolis, and the interviewee today, right? He has a lot of experience and was able to talk quite a bit about, you know, these kinds of historical elements that's quite useful, right? So even as a framing device, just the interview, I think, might be sufficient on top of maybe some scripting. But the fact that it's there, you know, I don't know exactly how much of it, because like these interviews, right? I mean, like yesterday it was about an hour, or, you know, perhaps even a little bit longer. Today it's about, I was looking at the footage, about 45 minutes, 50 minutes.
Yeah.
Tomorrow might be, you know, the same, about like an hour. So not everything obviously is going to make it into the film, but as a framing device, it's kind of like it's sufficiently there. So the first part of the conversation was just kind of like all about that before we even get to Bruce.
Yeah.
Then when we did get to Bruce, you know, the insights and the poetry and whatnot started coming out, which was very pleasant to hear. And there was actually like a funny moment, like speaking of, like, you know, our first film. So we had like two cameras set up. You had Joel's like big camera, the primary camera that we're using for the interviews, and then it was my smaller camera as a secondary angle. And I didn't even bother like setting it up or looking at it. I just put it there, and I was like, oh, like Joel's going over there to like finagle with it. So I was like, all right, he's gonna put on the settings, he's gonna do this. I literally didn't even open the camera. I didn't see anything that was going on in there. And Joe looked in, but he figured that I intentionally, because like last night I was shooting outside in the nighttime, and I was especially like trying to catch more artistic shots. So the manual setting was kind of you know, specific to that. So ultimately, when I when I looked at the footage, I was like, oh, this shit looks kind of dark. I wonder what happened. And but I was like, you know what? But Joel set this up, so I'm sure he knows what he was doing. And then a few minutes later, Joel was like, you know what? That footage was really dark. So he had no idea that that was happening. I had no idea. Well, he knew. We both knew what was happening essentially, but we figured that the other person was going to do some sort of intervention.
Yeah.
But I'm not really worried about it. Just like looking at it, I could sort of see that I could. Well, first of all, I'm not even sure that that angle is even necessary here. But assuming that it is, and I want to use it, I'm sure there's like some ways that I could fix it up and make it consistent with everything else. But it's one of those things where it's like, all right, well, I have to, watch out for my own equipment and not depend on the cinematographer to set everything up. Especially, I mean, like it is different enough from his cameras where if I mess around with the manual settings, it's not necessarily going to be like a very quick fix unless I get into it myself. But I will say it is funny that I literally did not even look to see what the camera was showing, and I was just totally trusting somebody that turned out to be very untrustworthy in that regard.
That's true. Yeah, really dropped the ball. I mean, in my defense, I think the only things I would say, number one, is that the look on the camera when I first opened it up, maybe I'm misremembering, but it seemed like it was a little brighter than what it ended up being. Also at the church yesterday, with a very similar angle, kind of slightly lower and to the right, looking up at the subject, or to the subject's left, I suppose, and looking, up toward them. It kind of also looked fairly dark in a way on the your little side panel monitor. But these things are very tiny. They're kind of hard to trust. And in the end, we were reviewing some of the footage, and it looked fine from the church. And
I wouldn't call it even dark. Like in the church, it was very true to life. Like there was a ton of like orange light, and I thought like, oh, this is the interviewee looks exactly how the camera was showing. Whereas like Joe's camera was much more a neutral kind of color. But it was it was going out at night, doing different manual settings. That's really the difference.
And that's on me in a way, just because I guess we have to your point, different cameras. You have a Canon, I have a Panasonic, so two different interfaces there. I don't really even know what settings to go into on your camera to fix it, I suppose. But yeah, I assumed, and I shouldn't have assumed, that you had already sort of dialed it in similar to yesterday's settings at the interview, and that these were going to be similar. And so we'll see what we can do. Hopefully you can lift that footage a little bit. To your point, we'll see if we really even feel like we do need it. But anyway.
Yeah, that's the thing. When I was looking at it, I was like, I don't even like this angle. That's how little. I had no idea what was going on in this camera. It turns out I didn't even like the angle, and I was like, well, I'm gonna have to like do this, do that if I want to use this. But it was funny. But like the later footage today, just going around the bridge and the water. I mean, I one thing that I'm noticing here is the amount of, if not like outright, smokestacks. There's still like a lot of just like regular buildings, right? They have a lot of fumes, a lot of like just vapor coming out, a lot of water vapor, and it gets really nicely entangled both with the wires as well as tree branches now that are like emptying. They're not empty, but they're emptying. And just getting that sort of footage where, it's almost, it's obviously not abstract, right? But it's abstracted where I try to crop out everything but, 3 discrete units, right? You might have horizontal lines. You might have smoke or vapor that you don't exactly know. Like today when I was capturing, you don't exactly know where it's coming from the way that I framed it. And then you have some branches, right? It's kind of like, it's almost like a slightly illogical setup that works in its favor. The amount of reflections that we have in the water, I think, is very nice. Even just like zooming in on something that's just a dark reflection that you can't even quite tell what it is, but it's in motion. And also one thing I noticed is some of the footage that I'm getting, like I very specifically want to also get the audio simultaneously. And I was thinking, a lot of people capturing this, they would think like, oh, this is such good nature footage, but isn't it such a shame that you hear such fast cars just passing you by, and they're so fast and the wind is so hard that it's blowing you over, and it seems to be disruptive of the nature. But in fact, I mean, this is actually very much in keeping with Bruce Ario as a poet and also somebody that had a relationship with the city and specifically with the people, right? There's always this kind of this promise and this implication of other people around in some way. It's not just nature for its own sake. There's always the presence of others that works out nicely.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. We were talking about that on the ending of the bridge walk over to lunch, where we were saying, in a lot of other contexts, these would be ambient sounds that are frustrating to a production crew, or certainly just they're going to find a way to cut it out and filter it out completely or whatever. And obviously with the style in which we're filming, just kind of run and gun documentary style, all that's making its way in as raw data for us to work with later. But I think we're both perfectly fine with it, because it is fitting for Bruce, and so much of the imagery and everything that he put into his work. So yeah, I think all that was successful. We're battling the elements. It's cold now. It's officially very cold here. It's dropped some more today, and just trying to be out there and really stick to our schedule, stick to our shot list, and get to a few more locations. Do you want to talk about going over to his unit at all, or do you want to save that for a bigger conversation after tomorrow?
So, we could just touch on it. We grabbed some footage we were able to get inside, not Bruce's unit, but just kind of on the outside, kind of going in. The building outside is actually pretty beautiful. It's very, very nicely done. Yeah. It seems to be very well maintained. We actually had a conversation with some of the keepers. Right, they were doing some work on the hedges and the flowers and whatnot outside. I was able to capture, the flurries already had started, and they didn't quite get big enough. Maybe when we go outside later tonight, they're going to get larger. But I was thinking, there was this maintenance area in the back where it was a red light. Light itself was yellow, but the actual physical lamp, it was red, and it was against this red door. And the fact that you had the yellow light and also this vapor coming out up from the ground, I wasn't capturing the source. I was just capturing the vapor. You had the vapor simultaneously with the flurries, which is very nice.
Nice, yeah.
Yeah, I was able to capture some birds as well. Also in the back, I was able to take a peek into his window from the back, which was was covered in dust, and there was some lighting and other things that just zooming in close enough where it's recognizably something that is it's something that you could sort of tell a little bit what it is in terms of lighting, but again nicely abstracted where you could use it against some of Bruce's writing, where again it's always that implication of there is some kind of human intervention going on, right? But it's not, it's not in the predictable, easy sort of way that that you would normally associate with that. So,
but it's been great. We did get those tiny little snow flurries. Whether we get any more or not, we captured a few on video. Mm-hmm. I got some right in front of his building. You got some in the places you went. That's a nice little gift that certainly you couldn't have anticipated necessarily. And I would like to get some sun tomorrow, just for a final element of weather, something different, something to cast some dimensionality to our footage with light, shadow, more vivid color on the trees, these kind of mm-hmm. things. The sun would help with that. It's been a very flat past couple of days in terms of the color palette, and that's okay. That's what this place is. We're here to be absorbed by it for this time mm-hmm. and deal with it on its own terms. But anyway, on the wish list, we just might get most of what we wished for. So
yeah, I think we'll get it. And originally we were making the plans in terms of interviews. I'm honestly glad that as many of them fell through as they did.
Yes,
because originally it was all right, do you think 8? What the yeah. Eight would have been totally impossible. Just going to one and setting up mm-hmm. the interview, right? Just going there, setting it up, right? The cameras, the lighting, all of that, deconstructing. Immediately after, I get so nervous that I have to like sit there with the laptop and transfer everything in case something happens onto, both the laptop as well as the external drive. Then I have to, like wipe the SD cards because, they get because we're shooting in a 4K, right? So everything gets filled up very quickly. And it would have doing literally more than 3 would have been impossible. Assuming you want to capture all the other stuff we want to capture. This is not just going to be a Talking Heads documentary. It's going to be part of it. And also, there's something about this number 3 where the 3 subjects that we have, they are a perfect counterbalance to one another. They are different angles of Bruce and Bruce's life. And their 3 seem to be fairly distinct people. And like if it was just one, like if you just do one interview for this documentary like this, right, in person, it just feels weird. Like, oh, here's just like the one guy that pops up every once in a while. If it's 2, it still feels a little weird because it feels insufficient, but 3 is enough, right? Especially since you have other stuff going on. Then we have the Zoom interviews, which are going to be primarily, visually, it's going to be there to just like frame, people's faces or whatever. But for the most part, we're going to be extracting the audio from those interviews to get, again, at different angles of Bruce, like different people that knew him that, can't quite, either we can or they can't sit down for an in-person interview. Either due to time or due to location difficulties or whatever it might be. So the fact that we had 3 that could turn out to be quite perfect, I think.
Well, and the 3rd came together at the last minute. I mean, that's been while we're here, basically. Yeah. That sort of came to our attention and was able to get set up, more or less. That was with some assistance from the church, was it?
Yeah, it was the church
that helped us, get our interviewee for tomorrow. So that to your point, I think we both were unrealistic and overly ambitious with the original number of interviews we had planned to get. I kind of had it in my head that we might be able to do 2 or 3 large blocks where we kind of stacked people back to back. And that could be efficient. I mean, we could have gotten 4 or 5 or 6 doing it that way, I think, because basically, leave everything set up. Subject 1 leaves, subject 2 or subject 3, comes in and they do their 45 minutes to an hour kind of thing. I mean, but it would have hamstrung us on the rest of our locations and these other places we want to get around to, and I think in the end, we're going to be glad that that we've got the 3 we have. We're going to have the others supplementing on Zoom or just audio. And then, all of the other footage and photos from these places around town that are going to give really nice shape to the piece. So it's turned out to be a really nice blend in the end, I would say.
Yeah. I'm happy with the way everything is going. And I said at the beginning that, this is like one of my biggest nightmares where everything is like demanding on your time. You have no, I have the few spare moments that I have, I'm literally like stretching, right?
Yes, you are.
I'm working on my back, right?
I'm usually snacking and you're usually stretching.
Yeah. Cause like it's literally, it's like walking around all day. It's dealing with the elements. It's carrying really, really heavy shit. It's setting this up. Like when you open up the laptop, it's emails, it's transferring files. And then, it's going to sleep and not even necessarily getting, the full amount that you need. But as it turned out, I mean, I'm actually really enjoying this. I'm not, I'm not so territorial about my time right now. I'm not so feeling like I have nothing. Because, it's one of those things where, the type of person I am, I want the time for myself. I want to be alone. I don't want something like pressing, in terms of their needs. But at a certain point, I mean, isn't this time for myself? I mean, what else is this? This is me, isn't it? What I'm doing right now, the work that I'm putting into it, the filmmaking, the thoughts of, the script's going to look like, the fact that I'm doing this, and, we're doing this for Bruce, this is me. This is the extension of me. This is the substance of me. If I'm at home, the substance of me, I could be working on a poem, I could be whatever, but this is now the substance of me. I guess I am now also a filmmaker too, right? So, what can I say? And with that, we should probably wrap this up.
Yeah, 20 seconds.
All right, guys. Thank you. And we'll have a final update tomorrow. Maybe it's going to be a sleepless night.
We'll see.